I have a pretty varied selection today, so hopefully you like the video. Games that never left the Amiga Part 3, here we go! Deathmask is a 1 or 2 player first-person shooter that I played a lot with a buddy of mine back in the day and had tons of fun doing so, which is odd as it's really a flawed product. But I suppose everything's better with a friend. Especially that it was only sorta first-person shooter and we were very hungry for this to run on our Amigas. Deathmask can be played in 3 modes: single player, cooperative 2 player, and the only mode that is somewhat playable, 2 player versus deathmatch. The first 2 are boring, and I mean it, the enemies look samey and everything is brown. There's brown all around. The levels are not great for a PvE campaign either, being identically looking and illogical mazes, and the way the game operates make you feel at constant disadvantage. It's not the case though, as it's not one of the most difficult shooters out there, but it just feels wrong. 2 player versus is where it shines. Sure, the screen is split vertically, so both of you see each other's locations, but we used to divide them between us with a makeshift wall made out of empty folders, pizza boxes, anything that would do the job, and just go hunting for one another, finding weapons, power-ups, and listening to any and all sounds of steps. Which was often misleading, I must add, as you never knew if you heard your friend approaching or he you. But whatever, it was fun. But why was this mode playable and single player and co-op wasn't? Because of a very specific design choice that the developers of the Deathmask made, which you've been watching for the last minute or so, and it ultimately made the game only playable in short bursts with a friend once every full moon. Namely the way the graphics are displayed. Rather than trying to imitate Doom that it clearly wanted to be, Deathmask picked something between it and older step-by-step dungeon crawling RPGs. A middle ground that sadly was not something that worked very well. So your character moved in step-by-step format and turned by 90 degrees only, and not smoothly, which is not only a little annoying but also disorienting if you're more used to shooters than classic RPGs. In the same time, the combat is real-time like in all shooters and not turn-based. It's weird and out of place, and the game doesn't know where it should stick to, is what I'm saying. Deathmask really wanted to be Deathmatch Doom, but for whatever the reason couldn't commit fully to the idea. Be it because of a need to rush the game to the market or lack of know-how by the programmers, the reasons are as unknown as it is unimportant today. All in all, it failed to deliver. Graphics are very simple and rather disappointing, especially that a lot of processing power was freed by not having a movement run fluidly. And Deathmask, with its couple of frames of animation per character and brown on even more brown with splash of brown presentation, just looks bland and boring. Sounds, however, are actually something worth highlighting. On a good sound system, they're loud and appropriately meaty to what's happening on the screen. I know that there's no such word, but that's how I see them. The ratatatas, the kapows, and all the booms are as I'd like them to be. Play it or not, whatever you decide, don't do it alone. I promise you that not all games in this video are bad, and that there are some even exceptional ones covered, but Forest Dump, sadly, is no better than Deathmask. But let's start at the beginning and not get ahead of ourselves. It's a Polish budget side-scrolling platformer that on the first glance looks as if it was trying to convey a similar feeling and offer comparable gameplay mechanics to Team 17's masterpiece, Super Frog. Naturally, it fails on all fronts. Whatever was the element that made Super Frog such a magical and beloved title is entirely missing in Forest Dump. Sure, it scrolls smoothly, the sprites are not bad and backgrounds are pretty good too, but it just does not compare to the pixel perfection the frog offered. Also, the main character's animation is so unnatural that it's unsettling to watch in a weird way. And the more you play the game, the more you get into it, you begin to notice and realize that some levels are nearly carbon copies of this found in Super Frog, short of most of secret passages, hidden spots, environmental puzzles and atmosphere. I mean, just by looking at parts of them I can tell you where a hidden tunnel should be or a stashed away coin cache in Super Frog. All based solely on the level design. That's how one-to-one parts of particular stages are. To complete the level you have to collect a certain number of coins for the exit to open, surprise surprise, and there are fruits to collect for points. They don't really serve any other purpose. All that within a allotted time limit. Same as in original though, it shouldn't be too difficult as it's there only to make sure that you don't leave the game unattended for too long. Stages are rather large and full of various bodies, stationary or otherwise. Most of them you can kill by jumping on their heads, but spikes are deadly and one hit you, so should definitely be avoided if only possible. Music, other than the terrible track in the menu, is non-existent and there's literally maybe 6 or 7 sound samples in the whole game. If you tell me that the devs had a budget of $1,000 and a crate of beer to make Forest Dump, I wouldn't consider it improbable. Finally, the difficulty, or lack thereof. Because other than the spikes, the game is so easy, a 5-year-old could probably complete it with some lives left and a lot of time to spare. And it's not even a joke. If Super Frog never existed, Forest Dump could be considered a slightly below average generic late Amiga platformer. But since it's obvious how much unsuccessfully it copies everything from Team 17's game and fails miserably at it, the best score I could give it is terrible. Don't play it unless you're a hardcore platformer fan and just have to sample them all. I promised you a good game, and here's one. Foundation Gold. Nothing to do with Apple TV series and Isaac Asimov's sci-fi series of books. A lot to do with Blue Byte Settlers though, as it's Amiga's spiritual successor to the first game and answer to PC's second outing in the long-running Settlers series. So, Foundation Gold is just that. A kingdom management game that's kinda like Settlers 2, but also a bit more and a bit less in the same time. I know, confusing. Let me explain. Gold version is a compilation of the basic game and its add-on, offering a whopping 80 missions to challenge even the most hardcore fans of the original. Sure, they're mostly all very similar, barring small differences in opponents, map topography and access to resources, but same could be said about missions in Settlers. While some basics are identical between the games, so you have to gather resources, erect specialized buildings, and there's 20 of these here, and also make sure that your citizens are well fed, some things are different, namely roads, which are not a necessity for resource delivery and for Kingdom to function here. There are more specialized units in Foundation too, like maidens, which are women quote-unquote used for breeding. And it sounds bad regardless how you think about it, so excuse me for that. Then wizards, that can use magic for some truly ungodly treatment of the dead, to erect buildings that is. And peasants that can be trained into various other positions but can also acquire some skills for themselves, like arson as a method of attack for instance. All these make for a novel feeling, even if largely very similar gameplay experience. Foundation's presentation is excellent, everything runs in high resolution, is multicolored and really pleasant to the eye. Sounds and music are very good too and round up the whole gold package nicely. That said, all that comes at a price. And in this particular case, it's the system requirements, which are incredibly high for Amiga, but given that the game came out in 2000, also understandable. The absolute basic is 68030 CPU with 6 MB of RAM and AGA chipset, but that provides for a rather choppy, unsatisfying experience. 68040 or even better 68060 with 8 megs and Picasso graphics card is what you realistically need to play it comfortably. Or, and that's what I would suggest, use the best Amiga on the market. So any PC you can get your hands on, cause any machine from the last decade should be able to emulate the Amiga and run Foundation at full speed with ease. I've praised the game for quite a while now, so let me tell you what I don't like about it. And there are a couple of minor things that grind my gears a little. For one, complete omission of the cute small animations that Settlers were full of, like constructing buildings plank by plank and brick by brick or chopping down the trees. You get what I'm saying, right? Things that made Settlers special and enchanting, the attention to the pixel in size detail every step of the way. And it's missing. Don't get me wrong, Foundation is excellent, just not as good as the game it's based on. And given the choice, I'd always rather play Settlers 2 Gold on PC. HeroQuest 2 Legacy of Sorasil is a turn-based top-down isometric fantasy tactical party role-playing, a follow-up to the first game and the single longest described game in this video within the first sentence of its preview. Oh my god, the grammar gods are furious after hearing this, I'm sure of it. And they would definitely strike me from heavens if I only believed in gods, that is. Anyway, while the HeroQuest system itself may be mechanically pretty simple, the included 9 scenarios are really challenging and will no doubt provide fans of role-playings with hours of fun and demanding action. Legacy of Sorasil reminds me of 2 role-playing board games that I play with buddies of mine semi-regularly, namely Gloomhaven and Descent, with a difference that it's slightly limited in scale, as these 2 can be enjoyed for months with the amount of content that they offer. So if you're familiar with them, you'll feel right at home at HeroQuest 2. Story-wise, unexpectedly, the land of Raya begins to fall in ruin. The rivers dry out, fields are dead and give no crop, and people are leaving their homes looking for new, more fertile lands. All that's missing to round up the despair are the armies of darkness, but these tend to closely follow the death of the lands themselves too. So time is of essence before it'll be too late for Rhea. Your friend, Alamon the Mystic, sends you a magical letter pleading for help. You're to travel around the surrounding kingdoms to find mystical artifacts, recover them and bring them back to him, where with help of his magic they will allow him to save the kingdom from destruction. And that's what you'll be doing, seeking the artifacts that will be used in Rhea's salvation. At the start of the game you have to create your 4-man party for the campaign, choosing between wizard, ranger, barbarian, dwarf, elf, paladin, cleric and mystic. All have their strengths and weaknesses, and creating a balanced party for your playstyle is a must. The game revolves in turns and uses action points as a basis for that. They're utilized for everything, from walking through searching and opening doors all the way to attacking and casting spells. And while it's pretty simple to grasp how everything works, it's best that you master it all fast, as each consecutive mission is more demanding. Unlike the first game, the missions are not standalone and form a campaign, and can take anything from 45 to 90 minutes on average to complete each. So while there's only 9 of them overall, they're much longer than in the predecessor. In between them you'll be able to visit the shop to sell found treasures and old gear, and to purchase new better equipment too. Oh, and a little hint from me, since you'll often need to split up and may be attacked at any point really, Not all combat encounters have to be resolved then and there. It's sometimes smarter to run away until you get to where you could rejoin with your other team members so that you could face the enemy as a group. It's not always possible obviously, but when it is, it's best to try to go for strength in numbers approach. The graphics and sounds are fantastic, and if you happen to play HeroQuest 2 on CD32, then the music is phenomenal too. Legacy of Sorasil looks and plays like a tactical role-playing board game, and a pretty good one at that. So if you enjoy these or like RPGs on home systems at all, it's definitely an interesting choice for a fun afternoon or two. Legion is a mutant, a son of Charles Xavier, and one suffering from multiple personalities disorder. Each of these displays entirely different mutant abilities, and since he's usually portrayed as anti-hero or villain even, it's a problem, cause some of them are really powerful. But Legion, that we'll talk about today, is something entirely different. It's a Polish, rather obscure turn-based strategy with role-playing elements, or a role-playing game with strategic overtones. Depends how you wanna look at it. You start with 5 characters that can come from 9 different races and are described by 6 statistics: strength, energy, speed, resistance, magic and experience. Perhaps not a D&D staple, but mix of stats that we've grown accustomed to over the years anyway. You can buy gear for each of your party members and it will increase their stats. As it does in typical RPGs, your team may be controlled as a whole or as individual units. The game's played in 2 modes. In first, you can check and adjust your equipment between the characters, upgrade your controlled settlements and form new legions. In second, you control each unit separately, traveling and experiencing the world. I mentioned earlier that we're giving a freedom of choice how to enjoy the game, and while it's only twofold, it's surprisingly different in gameplay styles. In general, the game is about raising your powers, and you can approach it in 2 ways. First, more peaceful, where you travel around the map, visit various towns, engage in conversations with NPCs, trade, and often pick up while meeting people singular or even whole chains of quests. So it's a united federation of planets' approach to expanding your sphere of influence, through peaceful means and cooperation with met groups and individuals. My kind of way. Second road to victory, however, is through blood and tears, through combat, through spying, tax levels management in your settlements and rivalry against 3 other leaders aiming for the win. So Klingon/Cardassian way, war, espionage and betrayal. It's odd how these Star Trek references fit in the game's description perfectly even though it's set in high fantasy medieval times, isn't it? Legion never received the recognition it deserved, but I suppose it's the release date that is to blame for it. While the game was of Polish origin, it was available in English too, but 1996 was not a year many Amiga users were still out there looking for new titles to play. So despite its qualities, Legion was doomed from the start. Kinda like Dr. Doom's plans are whenever he faces Fantastic Four. Oh my god, what's with all the references, I gotta stop, it's getting us nowhere. Liberation Captive 2 is a dark cyberpunk role-playing game and a sequel to 1990's Captive. I think I've covered Captive in one of my earlier videos, one of the 10 years of Amiga and 10 years of DOS gaming ones. So if you want to learn more about it, you can check it out there. They should both say more or less the same, as there weren't many differences between the 2 versions. Anyway, Liberation is a futuristic free-roam open-ended RPG, and from the get-go it was designed to be a CD32 game, as it featured long beautiful cutscenes, plenty of voice acting and CD-quality soundtrack. And if there were more games like that, perhaps CD32 wouldn't have failed as a console as bad as it did. Later, base Amiga outing came on 5 floppies and was stripped-down version of CD-based original. Even though it was as playable as the CD32 version, it lacked CD-based music and many of the sound effects. So if you have a choice, always go for the CD32 port, it's just superior. Liberation takes place in a huge, fully explorable city with hundreds upon hundreds of accessible buildings, something that was not done before, at least not on the Amiga. In a way, the City of Liberation is more open and free to explore than many open-world games of today are. I mean, comparing it to similarly themed Watch Dogs Legion released a year or so ago, where 95% of all buildings are facades, Liberation looks like a much bigger and better designed title, given Amiga's capabilities, that is. That's not all, however. Pretty much every feature you'll see in the city is either interactive or can be used in some way, starting from taxis to buildings of various kinds actually offering services that they would in real life. You play as Trill, the protagonist of the previous game, and this time a free man. But there wouldn't be much of a game if there was no conflict, right? So, as free as you are also witness to a rather brutal killing of a quote-unquote witness by the police robots. And you're also seemingly the only one realizing that it's not an isolated event, but something that's happening on a daily basis. So you take it upon yourself to uncover the conspiracy, free all the innocent captives, at least those that are still alive, and survive, as someone who knows too much is definitely not someone whose well-being is in the interest of the establishment. Liberation is a huge game, and a very unique one at that. and if I had to describe it to someone using other titles, I'd say it's a mix between GTA, Deus Ex, with a touch of Morrowind for good measure. It's an experience like no other is what I'm saying here, and that it's very easy to get lost in the world of Liberation. In a good way, that is. Lionheart is a fantasy action platformer, where you play as He-Man, Conan the Barbarian, Lion-O from Thundercats, or a mixture of all three in one protagonist. And only one of these four is potentially correct. Sorta. It's also a game that many of the former Amiga owners used to show off their system's capabilities to PC and Atari ST gamers. I mean, what was possible with just 1 MB of RAM on a very basic A500 was uncanny. It was a true technological achievement. It ran like a charm on this very simple configuration too, offering incredibly detailed and enchantingly smooth animations with no slowdowns, and multi-level parallax scrolling backgrounds that looked like something straight out of fantasy book cover. Now, if you ever seen Shadow of the Beast, another show-off type of the game, you know that while it looks incredible, it plays as fun as it is to play with 2 bricks and a stick with dog's poo at the end of it. So not very. But Lionheart, oh my days, it's a package alright. It's a really enjoyable and engaging experience that's actually unlike aforementioned Beast, not crippled by the constantly respawning enemies, blunt and repeatable gameplay, and unclear direction. It's fantastic. Let's start at the beginning though. You play as Valden, a beautiful name indeed. And I think that in Latin it means a friend of the turtle. Don't quote or fact check me on that though. And you've been unfairly imprisoned. Why? Who cares? You have, and that cannot stand. The king, however, gives you an opportunity to prove your innocence and regain freedom by seeking out and recovering his stolen holy jewel, the titular Lionheart. Naturally, you agree, cause if you wouldn't, we'd have no game to play. The levels are varied and interesting too, and even using a very unique approach to difficulty. If you pick a higher tier of it, they may not only feature more challenging enemies but also slightly redesigned and expanded environments, changing the level's layout a little. Lionheart is an excellent proof that Amiga could offer a quality console-like platformers. And if there's one thing I don't particularly like about it, it's the controls. They take time to get used to, and for some it may be seriously discouraging. But when you finally do master them, there's a lot of fun to be had here. As depicted in a beautifully animated introduction sequence, you're awakened by the phone call from your angry boss. Apparently the film reels you've been working on are missing, and your competition is to blame for it. So you do whatever's to do in these types of situations when one happens to be a video game protagonist, so you set off to recover them. Premiere is a movie-themed action platformer in which you're invading the competing movie studio to recover 6 of your films, each lost on a different thematically set. These are Wild West Western, science fiction, cartoon, horror, black and white comedy, and I'm not sure what the last genre is supposed to represent, but it's different to the first 5. Each of these sets features appropriately designed for it enemies, decorations and music, so you are always feeling like you're part of a different movie, so to speak. All of these sets also have backdoors, upon entering which you move into the backstage section, so a world of scaffolds, props and film cameras. It too is full of enemies, so while it provides a variety of gameplay, it definitely does not offer you a breather. Interestingly enough, all the weapons that you can find and pick up are always well fitting within the theme of the set that you're in. Whenever a particular level is completed, before you can recover the missing film reel, you must act out a scene from the movie in a unique and short minigame. They are all different to one another, not only presentation-wise, but even in terms of their genre, so these definitely prolong the replayability of Premiere considerably, as more often than not they can be more fun than the main game is. While technically speaking the platforming sections of Premiere are rather generic and nothing special, gameplay-wise when compared to a sea of other Amiga platformers, the ever-changing themes, minigames and backstage section make it to be an unusual one-of-a-kind platformer. Perhaps not the best on the system, far from it in fact, but definitely one among the most memorable. It's worth pointing out that Premiere's graphics are phenomenal. All sprites are large and super smoothly animated, looking as if they were literally torn out of the cartoon of some sort. And all that on superb and incredibly detailed backgrounds. Premiere is a dictionary example of an exclusive title. Not only it did not release on any other platform, but also there's no other game like it on Amiga itself. Dang it, there's Oscar. By 1995, most Western developers were releasing either their last or penultimate games on the Amiga, but the system was still very popular and with a steady user base in the East, in recently independent former Eastern Bloc countries like Poland or Lithuania. And since I'm hailing from one of them, I can first-hand confirm that that was the case. And the developers there did not plan on abandoning the system anytime soon. At least not how Menbat's parents did him by selfishly dying at the hands of a random robber. How inconsiderate. I'm Batman! Okay, sorry Bruce, that went too far. Looks like I've upset him. It's nothing that the cake, therapy and some alcohol can't cure though. Anyway, the devs in the Central Eastern Europe still saw Amiga as a very capable, popular and most importantly potentially profitable platform. So abandoning it would be a mistake with such a huge and still hungry for new releases user base. Enter Lost in Mine, a puzzle platformer by a Polish developer Wookiesoft. At first glance it may not look like much, but looks are often deceiving and Lost in Mine is the case of that exactly. It's an excellent, even if at the time mind-boggling puzzler with a very simple premise at heart. All you have to do is get to the exit. Simple as that. But it's not the destination, it's the journey. And it's that journey that is what's great and challenging about it. Unlike many other games in the genre, Lemmings or Humans for instance, you don't pick actions from a list of skills or buttons, you have to platform your way out of the level using various installations and machines spread in strategic locations around it. And they can be any and all mining equipment from simple drills and lifts through harvesters to even explosives among others. Some controlled manually, other remotely at distance. Oh, and don't get discouraged by the fact that Lost in Mine released in Polish only, as other than the title screen you won't really see it anywhere else. At least not in any meaningful way. It's not very often that I get to speak about truly unique and innovative titles. I often do about one of the two, but rarely both, and Lost in Mine is just that. It's hella fun if you enjoy puzzle games, and if you also like platformers, it's even more so. If you get a chance, definitely check it out. When Perihelion the Prophecy came out, I was 12, perhaps 13. While not a kid anymore and already heavily invested into RPGs, I wasn't prepared for it. And even though I tried approaching it numerous times, I always somehow end up bouncing off of it and landing with another game in my disk drive. Perhaps it was the initial difficulty or the brown-greyish tones of everything in its presentation, or simply me not being mature enough to fully encompass and understand what I had been given a chance to experience. And even though now dark, gritty and cyberpunkish aesthetics of Perihelion would be my dream world to visit in a game, I never completed it. And based on the amount of games I'm interested in that are released yearly, chances are I never will. That's one of the biggest failures of my personal gaming history. Still, since I've spent long enough on myself, let's talk a little about Perihelion itself. You're in charge of 6 characters whose races are an odd and very intimate amalgamations of human and different animal and mechanical entities. And you have to save the realm that you live in from an evil being that's slowly materializing into your dimension. Even more so, as it's foretold to bring a terrorizing end to it. The game is viewed from the first-person perspective when traversing, with battle sequences playing out in tactical top-down view, in turn-based mode. Quite unique, at least for the time, was the skill leveling system that raised those most used faster than the others. It's something that we've seen in numerous games since, especially in those from early Bethesda, but back then, and on the Amiga, it was not common. Perihelion is one of those games that I've never seen a single negative review for, and that's definitely something worth mentioning. Cause even if I never completed it, it's gotta speak to its quality in terms of both story and strategic combat encounters. Dropping an omnipresent and milked to death by the early 90s fantasy D&D formula for a darker and entirely new cyber RPG system in Perihelion should be a recipe for its success. And yet, somehow, despite all the building blocks being in the right places, it never reached the popularity it deserved and remained a rather unknown, even if unique, Amiga exclusive. If you like RPGs, especially those sci-fi cyberpunk-like ones, and enjoy turn-based tactical combat, and on top of that have a lot of free time to sink into something, Perihelion is definitely an excellent pick. What an episode! It may have started with 2 stinkers of various stench levels, but it quickly progressed to an excellent 8 exclusives. I hope you enjoyed learning about them as much as I did talking. Whether you did or did not, I won't know until you let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.